Hey everyone, welcome to You, Me, and a Fence Post, the podcast with a sibling's perspective around farming, family, friends, and a whole lot of other different topics. I'm Clint Schaffer.
And I'm Tara Schrock.
And today we have a special episode where we're sitting in our dad's shop here, and he's actually agreed to join. So Dad, how about you introduce yourself?
I'm Doug Schaffer. Apparently I'm responsible for these two, so we'll see how this goes today.
Well, that's that. So hang tight and we'll be back. Hey everybody, welcome back. So Tara, here we are sitting with Dad. So did you ever think this was going to happen?
I would prefer to sit with him than you.
Oh, okay. That's where today's going to go then. I see that. All right. What are we going to talk about today?
I think we're going to talk about springtime, getting ready for planting, sitting here in the shop with the planter in the background.
Yeah, thank goodness all that white stuff is gone.
Oh, thank goodness.
Warming up. So, Dad, what have you been up to here lately?
Well, we've been working on the planter here for about the last 4 days to a week. It took that long to get the planter out of the shed because of the winter. We had ice around the doors, couldn't get it out, so we're finally getting around to working on the planter. That's the main thing right now.
We were just on snowmobiles like a couple weeks ago, buried in snow. So, it changed quickly.
Yeah, it's like snow and ice around here has just been crazy. So, like you said, I think your planter was snowed and iced in there for a while. So, what you and Uncle Bill have been working on some of the planter units, right?
Yes, we have. We were going to rebuild the bean side of the planter this year, and a couple of bent frames that I got kind of tackled into there last year. And
hold on. How did you bend those frames? How did the frames get bent? Let me reword that.
I believe I drove a little too close with the tractor putting it in the shed and tickled these wheels and then bent a couple of frames on them. So,
Tara, is that surprising to you at all? Like for how, like growing up, wasn't it always like give you anxiety when Dad was backing something in and it had to be within like
an inch? Just
you got an
hairline.
inch? I think it was when it was me, it was like a quarter of an inch, maybe an eighth of an inch.
All I have to say is I'm finding out years later what you didn't back in a quarter of an inch, and it was a quarter of an inch too much. So, But I didn't hear about that when it happened. So we'll just put it that way.
I don't know about you, but I plead the fifth on that. So
You do.
What are some of your favorite things coming out of winter and rolling into spring?
I think the best thing is, of course, to be able to get outside. You've been cooped up most of the winter, and to be able to get out on a warm day when it's 50, 60, 70 degrees is fantastic. Down here, that used to, when we had cattle, that was the start of calving season, which was always it was an interesting time, and we enjoyed it. In the same way now, you can get out on that four-wheeler to go scout around, get the machinery out, see the things spring back into life, and it's just a re-energizing part of the life of farming and of life in general. And I think that's the most favorite part. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. How about you, Tara? What's your favorite part of springtime rolling in?
I honestly, it's the warm weather, everything turning green again, and life again after a really long year, a really long winter.
Yeah.
And a long year with the pandemic anyway. So, it's nice to get back outside again. What about you?
Yeah, I would say like I know it's spring when you can walk out on the deck and at some point in time and like I can drink a cup of coffee or whatever and like that's some like the times when I just know that it's getting nice and warm, like.
And then you look forward to helping Dad go around the fields and pick up the sticks and.
It's that time of year, isn't it? It's like, hey, jump on your four-wheeler and go pick up every stick that God has ever made.
Fact.
Or, Dad, you mentioned cattle, right? How about all the hot wire you had that roll thing?
Yeah, we got a matter of fact, I still got it tucked away in the garage over there.
That does not surprise me.
So if you really miss it too much, we can maybe rent you out to the neighbors. But anyway, we used to put a hot wire was our main source of keeping the cattle in, and yes, every spring it had to be wound up and put away and labeled and so on and so forth, so that we could reel it out next fall and get the cattle back out on the stalks and the pastures. So yes, that was an integral part of the spring process here at on our farm. So
I was never promoted to the tractor driver and that got to drive that tractor around an Unreal Defense ever. I was never promoted to that job.
Does that have anything to do with that quarter of an inch that was too close, you suppose, or something? I don't know. I'm just asking. Is there any possible?
I don't think anybody was promoted to the tractor, though. I mean, like, this isn't like, I don't think you're left out here, Tara. I think there was one tractor operator here that's sitting here.
Well, I guess I'll plead the fifth. What can I say?
So we talk about the great things of spring, but also spring has its own headaches too. So what's your worst part about spring getting here?
The worst part about spring for me is the mud. And living down here, we're on I will call it a wet farm, basically, anyway. And under the bluff, you've got your gravel roads, you've got and mud. I hate mud. It's like you try to step off the beaten path, you try to step off the sidewalk or whatever, and you're up to your ankles in mud, and hopefully not any worse than that. And until the frost gets out of the ground and things start settling up, no, that part of it I do not care for. You look out over the field, it looks good, it looks great, but you can't get off the path to do anything. So that's the part that and then the other thing I don't care for about spring is that you can take a 50 or 60 degree day with a cold, damp wind, and it's cold. And, you think, oh, boy, temperature looks good till you get out there, and, wow, it's cold. So anyway.
Yeah, we get that humidity back, right, in the air that hasn't been here. So, no, that's for sure. So, yeah, the mud is horrible. I am one of those crazy people that has an indoor dog. And, you let your dog out, and then it's like, this is the worst time of year because they're just covered in mud every time.
And to mention, his dog is a very large dog, and it's like the party dog. So it's like
fluffy.
when it goes outside, when she goes outside, she comes back a muddy mess.
And another thing, Tara, that I'm going to say about Mabel, this dog, is that every time she gets out down here, we have this creek. And so Mabel goes to this creek. Now, I'm going to tell you something about your brother. He's very good at what he does, but he's a slow learner because every time he opens that door in that truck to let the dog out, she goes to the creek. Now the rest of us all know that. Now I'm really telling you, and Clint almost acts like he's shocked when he looks up and here comes this dog back, pure mud. See, so I do get some pleasure out of this. That it's and then he has to wash her under the hydrant and start over. So anyway, I had to put that in.
Can we move on to a different topic at this point?
Well, it's spring. We thought we had to give Mabel a
right.
shout out.
And you want to know what we like about spring, and I'll add that to my list of watching you be shocked when your dog jumps in the creek. Just put it that way.
Okay, all right. I'm regretting bringing that up already. Now we talked about like what you like about spring and things of that nature. How about we look back at Grandpa and how some of the contrast between how you get ready for springtime and planting and how Grandpa would have done it back in the day.
Yeah, to clarify things just a little bit, I grew up on where livestock was the main source of income. In other words, we used every bit of crop that we raised went into feeding our livestock, between our cows and our fat cattle. So in the spring, calving was a very big part of it. And then when we got ready for planting, that was a whole different process. Everything back then had to be moldboard plowed. If it wasn't done in the fall, we had to get out and it had to be done in the spring. So, and then the planters were set up. There wasn't even any disc openers. It was a runner type planter. So everything had to be worked down extremely fine in order before we could plant corn. And it's a different no-till that term wasn't even thought of,
right.
Wasn't even so to get ready, the basic thing was you had to oil the chains on the planter, make sure the pin fit, because a planter was hooked and unhooked in basically one pin, and that's all you had. There was no monitor.
You didn't have to worry about hydraulics and like all the electronics.
No. Matter of fact, the first planter that I remember was a mounted planter on a IHH tractor. The wheels on 40-inch rows were set out as wide as they could be, and you turned around and you put that rear wheel back in the same track that you came. Your markers were pinned up against the lights, and you pulled a trip rope, and the marker would fall down, and when you got to the end, you pulled them up. with a rope, and then they would latch, and then you turned the corner and you did the same thing. 2-row planter. You bolted this onto the side of the tractor, and then went out and planted your crop. 2 rows. Now,
You ready to do this, Tara?
now,
I want to see you hoist up these markers at the end of the row.
now, some of the neighbors, we did not do it, but some of the neighbors were still using what they called a tripwire, which would so that you could the wire you moved it across each time at the end of the field, and it tripped the planter at the exact spot so that you could cross cultivate with a planter with a cultivator in the spring. You had to go lengthways and then you went crossways. So this with its tripwire, it had knots on. I've still got a roll of the wire, and it literally would,
Probably on that thing that we rolled up there that we were talking about.
similar, and it would trip that planter at the exact spot. But anyway, you would put back then we put 3 in a hill, and then eventually went to 2 in a hill as what that was called, and then that was called check planting. And
So I think we
anyway.
studied this in school. Didn't you bury a fish underneath the seed for for nutrients at that point, right?
that was 2 years before that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We didn't have the fish. So.
Okay. Yeah. No, isn't that crazy though to think about the differences between what Dad does today and what Grandpa does?
Yeah.
The sad part about it is, not to interrupt, but when I started farming, the first year I was still teaching down at Biggsville, and I bought a John Deere planter that was still a runner planter, and my first planter when I went to a 8-row was a runner planter. We didn't even have discs on them, and so the same thing there. You would disc the ground after plowing it, disc the ground once, twice, then maybe with a field cultivator or a harrow, and it had to be that fine for this runner to go through the soil and plant the seed. And I did that for the first probably 3 to 4 years when I started farming. And then went to the actual disc, but it didn't have the gauge wheels on it that we have today. So, difference.
There's
the
some
difference
things
is
that I'm
unreal.
kind of happy I missed.
Technology.
Yeah.
I like it.
I know that's where some people complain about technology. I'm like, bring it on. Auto steering. I'll do the whole.
Well,
9
and
yards.
the first 4-row planter we got at home after that mounted planter, we had a planter that had on the front. It was 4 rows. It had 2 hoppers for starter fertilizer. Then you had a hopper for insecticide, seed corn, and herbicide. Herbicide at that time was banded in a 7-inch band rather than broadcast. Matter of fact, when I was teaching ag, you called herbicide at that time was called wet weather insurance. It was not. You did not put it on other than in a strip, and then you cultivated up to 3 times. And so anyway, the Dad used to joke about that. Well, he loaded everything up on the planter except the seed because he had so much to put in it. The bags, we put in 50 pounds at a time, or 50 pounds, dumped them into, you filled the hopper. Then you put a bag in the insecticide, a bag in the herbicide, and he made that joke that, well, then I forgot the seed.
Forgot the seed.
Which was a joke, but I
Right.
meant that was...
You know, as I look at some of the old older equipment, I mean, I look at our 1955 300, right? 1955. That's the first and only tractor Grandpa bought that was brand new. But you pull your grandkids on that all the time in a few fairs too, don't you?
Oh yeah, we had it. It was refurbished here a few years ago, and so yeah, we still try to keep it. And I put it on. I use it now for seed cart or for a head cart.
And it's basically a parade tractor.
Definitely a parade tractor. I think shout out to cousin Mick on the resto on that one, right? Yeah.
Yes, he took it out. He did a pimp my ride and took it out, and him and Clint stole it from my shed in the middle of winter and took it out to where Mick lived out in western Iowa,
Yeah.
and they did through a restore and brought it back, and I didn't know it was gone.
That kind of caught me off guard right there. That was hilarious.
I know, but you did leave tracks. It's just that he didn't see the tracks. They were
true.
covered. They were covered up because you guys were nervous about getting caught.
That
but-
is true. Yeah. As a matter of fact, though, as I'm thinking, pulling the grandkids on there, I don't think you've been promoted to tractor driver on that one either, have you?
Thanks for that reminder. I did drive I always did raked hay with that tractor.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I
yeah.
was promoted a tractor driver. I actually did more of it than you did. So
Pointing fingers here. Now hold on, Tara. If we're gonna get into throwing some shade here around, Dad at one point in time grabbed the, I don't even know what year it was, I think a 51 M, and he hooked on, was it a 3-bottom plow?
Yeah, 314s.
But that M had no power steering, and those little tires up close in the front. Oh my goodness, it was horrible for trying to learn how to do that. So I don't know if you ever learned how to drive.
I did not.
Yeah, that's the key.
We didn't even have power steering until we got the 1955 tractor. So for these two to sit here and say how bad it was without power steering, oh wah wah wah.
So what are some of the funny stories that or some funny memories that you have of planting season?
Well, it was one, we had a nephew of mine. He came from Colorado and stayed with us, and I was planting corn really late one night. They were calling for rain, and so I had a single hopper planter, and I was planting an early season corn. So I planted till probably close to midnight that night, trying to get done before the rain. And the next morning, I went out, and I had told him where to get this seed and what to get. And when I went out next morning, I started going through the bags, and I had planted from the earliest to the fullest season corn I had, all at the same time mixed in. He had brought me just bags of corn that looked the same, and at 10 o'clock at night, I was throwing it in the planter. And I went, oh, my goodness, and turned out it wasn't any worse than any other crop I had. So that's when you start to find out, well, maybe a blended thing isn't a bad thing after all.
That's like after you put in a test plot and you just throw all the seed in the hopper, right? Mix it all in.
Same exact thing,
Yeah.
and it turned out all right. But I'm telling you, it was dead panic for a while, and you think you're not going to live, something's going to be wrong, and so on and so forth. But that did happen.
Ah.
And then I guess you talk about things in the past that did happen, and is that the first time I ever would try to tell my kids, my wife, that you got to bluff these cattle when you're trying to sort them and going through a gate. And when a cow has her calf in the spring, she's very, very controlling, very touchy. And I'll never forget the first time I told Clint, I said, you've just got to stand your ground, and you've got to holler at them. You have to fake them out, or they will go through you.
I don't need to do any of that.
We were in this lot right here trying to sort the cows and the calves.
Actually, we are sitting in the old cattle lot.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
And so and he held his ground, and when we got done, he couldn't talk. I said, well, now how was that? And nothing came out. He was probably 16, I'm guessing, in that ballpark. And then as far as with Tara, I'll never forget one time I had this cow, in the time you had to clean a cow once in a while after calving because the placenta wouldn't come out. Well, Tara was supposed to hold the tail for me so that I was cleaning the placenta, and somehow she thought this tail was a little too crappy, so she lets loose of it, and that cow wraps it right around my head. I'm very happy if this time, you can imagine, I get a crappy tail wrapped around my face. So anyway, just some of the original stories back from the day.
Maybe this is why I never got a promotion.
Yeah. Still haven't got that promotion. So.
Neither.
And then we won't talk about the tracks coming out of the door, sneaking out of the house, and we won't even get into that subject.
This is a family-friendly podcast, Dad.
Okay.
So during calving season, though, do you remember when I ran over a calf? On the four-wheeler? So I had a neighbor girl over riding the four-wheeler as well. And I hit something, and when I hit something and ran over it, she fell off, and I thought I ran over her. So I was screaming, like, oh, my gosh, like I just ran over you, and then I came back, and Dad's like, I go, you wouldn't believe this, but I hit a calf, a baby calf. And he's like, well, is it okay? And I'm like, I don't know. And he goes, well, what happened? And I go, it got up and ran away.
The actual story was she come back and said, Dad, I killed a calf. She said, I ran over a calf and I killed her. Jenny fell off. And this guy, I said, well, how do you know you killed it? Is it laying up? Well, no, it went off bawling. He's just fine, But then that brings up another story. Come to think about it. Back in, would have been 1983 when we were building an addition on the house. We happened at that time, we still had three-wheelers, and I was running down to the shop to pick up something, and Tara had a little three-wheeler.
Oh.
And so she comes down from the house, and she decided to turn in front of me to make me stop. Which we played this on, had fun playing games on the three-wheelers. And so I'm coming as fast as that little 125 will go, which is probably 40 or 50. She turns in front of me, and instead of running over her, I turned it, my back wheel went over. Make a long story short, end over end, broke 2 of my ribs, busted my wrist, and anyway, it was definitely an interesting story.
You know, I don't think you can tell that story though without adding the stubbornness of you though 2 weeks later.
I don't know what you're talking about.
yeah. I mean, Tara, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
Yeah. What happened 2 weeks after this broke his wrist?
Well, quite frankly, he didn't want to go into the doctor to begin with.
Dad didn't want to go to the doctor? What?
I know. He was gasping for air because he had broken ribs and did not want Mom to take him to the doctor. So we started off like that. So
nice. And then so you come home. Now I don't really remember. I only know this through stories because I would have been about a half a year old at that point in time. But what? So you have a cast on your arm, on your broken wrist, and what do you decide to do?
Well, I had to remove the cast so I could use it.
In 2 weeks, right?
Well, yeah, it was healed.
A pair of tin snips, I believe, is what you used on this?
Tin snips and a hacksaw and a hatchet and some other things. But between Mick and Mom and I, we got it off finally. So
yeah, and don't you still complain about that wrist hurting you?
I'm not sure I know what you're talking about.
All right. Well,
one other story I do remember, and then I'll be quiet about it. But back in the day, and Anita and Tara had gone to Aledo, and we had a rabbit. We had this rabbit out in the yard in his cage, and so this rabbit got smart, and he had burrowed down into the ground and had a deep burrow, and the kids couldn't catch him anymore, and they called him Popsy. That was his name. And so we were going to have, I think, somebody's 8th grade graduation, I believe, maybe yours down here or something. So you and Mom went to town. And so I was down raking some rock around the patio, and Clint and Brandy were in trying to catch Popsy. And pretty soon here comes Clint around all proud. He said, I caught Popsy. And he's petting this rabbit, and he brings it down there to where I'm at. And I looked at it. I said, Clint, that rabbit is dead, has been dead. They went in, and he pounced on him in the cage and this rabbit had been dead for 2 weeks. No, I'm exaggerating. It wasn't that long. But anyway, so it was in the middle of August. It was extremely dry, and I told him I was going to go bury the rabbit. And so I went down the road with a shovel and proceeded to do what we called back then an aerial burial. In other words,
burial.
It just so happened at that time, my wife and my daughter were coming down the road and happened to watch me do this aerial burial. So when I get home,
busted.
Yeah, I was busted. But then Brandy comes running out crying to Tara, said Popsy died and Dad went and buried him. And Tara said, I don't think Dad buried the rabbit, which I did. An aerial burial was an acceptable farm life thing to do for a small rodent. And so
a small rodent.
Anyway, that's what happened.
All right. Well, I tell you what, we've covered a lot of ground here today, Tara. That's just like a trip straight down memory lane here.
It was, and evidently I, wasn't promoted for a multitude of reasons. So.
Well, yeah. Hey, we got this spring, right? Maybe you might be able to get promoted to tractor driver. All right. Well, hey, Dad, I just want to say thank you for joining Tara and I on You, Me, and a Fence Post here.
Sure. Glad to join, and things have definitely changed a long time. 2 years ago, I was planting Tara up on top, waiting for Mom to bring me a bag of seed corn, and Clint calls from St. Louis, where he was working, and asked me why I'm sitting in the corner. He can watch on technology, so I just want to show you how far technology has come in the day since I've been farming, and he's wanting to know why I'm sitting in the corner because he can tell I'm not planting.
See, some people want to GPS their kids, and other people like to GPS their parents. So
there you go. See,
I never looked at it like that. That's hilarious.
So anyway, I'm sitting there thinking, the kids are tracking me. So
yeah, there you go. Well, hey, with that, I want to say thank you all for joining us today. I had an absolute blast with my sister and my father here. This has been so much fun. I do also want to say, if you like the video, be sure to like the video, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notified each and every time that we push out new content. Also, we're available wherever you listen to podcasts at as well. So with that, I appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.